everybody is logged onto the Chromebook, so I want you to go into Google Chrome and then go to Google Drive within Google Chrome. You should find the file that was shared with you under the Shared with Me tab. I want you to make a copy of that and save that copy in some physics folder that you're creating. Now, if you were the person that collected the data with your phone, it's already in that folder. You've saved it to some physics folder or some place that you'll be able to find that file. If it was shared with you, then it won't be in that folder right now. It'll be in the Shared with Me folder. So go under Shared with Me, find that file that was just shared with you, right-click it or two-finger touch it, make a copy of that, and save that copy into your physics folder, whatever you're calling that physics folder. If you are the person that actually collected the data with your phone, you also need to make a copy of that data. Nobody, including the person who collected that data with their phone, will be working off of the original data file. Everybody will be working off of a copy. Does that make sense, you guys? So if Sarah was the one who used her phone to collect the data, she would have shared that data with her partners. Her partners will find that data under Shared with Me on their Google Drive. They need to make a copy of that file and save it in some physics folder that they've created. Now, Sarah, she's already got that file in her folder, but she also needs to create a copy of that. And the way to do that is to two-finger touch your mouse pad. That's the equivalent of right-click on a PC. So two-finger touch or right-click, and then create a copy. When you're creating that copy, you can title that whatever you want. Maybe it makes sense to title it something with today's date, right? Physics data, September the 17th, or something like that, just so that next time when you save data, you'll know which one is which. You call it whatever you want, but before you click enter, make sure that it still has the .csv on the end of it. So don't just rename it and get rid of everything. Instead of being called exported data.csv, it might be called physics data September 17th .csv. Keep the .csv there. The reason we want all of you to create a copy of this is because if we don't create a copy, then everybody will be working off of the same file, and when one person plots a graph, that'll appear in everybody's work. We don't want that, right? We want you to be able to plot your own graph and do your own analysis, your own work. If you create a copy and everybody, including the original owner of the file, has a copy as well, then we can do our own work on our own copy of the data. And we still have that original file that's been unchanged, just in case we need to go back to it for some reason. Now what we're going to do is open the file. So mine is exported data.csv. I'm going to double click that, and I go into something that I can't do anything with. I see a whole bunch of data, most of which is completely irrelevant, and it's in some app that is viewing only. I can't do anything with it. So I'm going to click on this little open with thing at the top, and I'm going to open it with Google Sheets. Open it with Google Sheets. So that should pop open now. All of that data should pop open in a moment into a Google Sheet. That's good because that's where we're going to do our data analysis, our graph, and so on and so on and so on. Now, mine's really, really small here. I'll make it a little bit bigger for us so we can see it. And then we'll start doing some analysis with this, deleting all of the data that we don't need and showing you how to plot the graph. Now it's time to delete a bunch of extraneous data. All we wanted for our data were two columns, time and position. We can see a whole bunch of data here. Force, acceleration, x-axis, y-axis, z-axis, angular velocity, whatever that means. We don't want most of that stuff. So we're going to delete most of that stuff. Now, some of you have 2, 3, 4, 5 trials. You only want 2 columns from one trial. I've got one trial, and I have to pick 2 columns from one trial. You have to pick 2 columns from one trial as well, but you have to get rid of 3 or 4 or 5 other trials. Make sure you know which trial you're picking from, and you're going to delete the rest of the columns. Let me show you how to delete the rest of the columns, okay? Now, for me, I'm going to delete the rest of the columns from one trial. You're going to delete, some of you guys will delete columns from other trials as well. So I can see here that the 2 columns that I want for me are column B, time, and position, column H for me. So B and H for me. You guys may be B and H if it's trial 1 that you want to keep, but if it's trial 4, it's not going to be columns B and H. Does that make sense, you guys? Just identify which columns it is, identify which data it is that you want to keep. Now, what's this? I want to delete columns I through M here. I want to delete columns I through the rest of it. There's a bunch of other ones too, but these are all in a row. So let's focus on those ones first. I through M. So what I'm going to do is click on, let me move over here. It's a little bit easier. To delete the columns, we want to click on the actual column headers, not the column names. Don't want to do that. I don't want to use highlight data. Don't want to do that. I want to click on the column header. See where my mouse is right now? I want to click on that, and I want to select all of those columns. Now, don't hit the delete button. That's going to delete data, but it's not going to delete your columns. For this data, it's not the end of the world because it's the columns on the far side. But if it's columns in between other columns that you want to delete, then we're going to be left with a bunch of blank columns. It's not what we want. So highlight those columns and then right click. For you guys on Chromebooks, it would be 2-finger touch. That's the same as right click. Right click, and then I want you to literally delete those columns. In this case, it's I to M. Now, when I click that, those columns will be gone. Now, I'm also going to delete column A with the time and date. So select that column, not the data, but the column. Right-click, delete that column. I also want to delete B through F. If I just press the delete key, it's going to delete the data, but leave a bunch of blank columns. If I right-click it and delete columns, then look what I've got. I've got 2 columns with time and position in them. All right, now it's time to plot a graph. Now I know somebody just asked me a question. Well, don't we have some data, extraneous data at the beginning and the end before we pushed it and after we caught it? Yes, we do. But we don't really know what's extraneous yet until we see our graph. We'll worry about deleting that extraneous data later on. Right? We knew which columns we didn't want. We don't know right now which rows we don't want until we see our graph. So let's plot the graph and see that. I'm going to go up here to insert. I'm going to insert a chart. When I insert a chart, we will highlight the columns and then insert a chart. Once we've highlighted the columns, we're going to insert a chart. There's my first table, or my first graph. Position run 1 versus time run 1. Here's my position run 3 versus time run 3, depending upon which one you use. That doesn't really matter. Now, before I do anything else, just so I don't forget this, I'm going to put my initials in there, right? We know we need initials in there, so let's click on that, and let's just right after that, click. For me, it's going to be BD. For you, it's not going to be BD. Okay, I've done that. I don't have to worry about missing that now. Let's make sure that it does say position versus time rather than the time versus position. Let's make sure that position is on my y-axis, time is on my x-axis. And now it's time to delete some extraneous data. So clearly this data doesn't matter, right? This data was collected before I pushed the cart. It looks like up to about 2.5 seconds is extraneous. For me, for you, that's going to be a different number, right? I want you to take note of where the straight line on the graph appears to start. And I want you to delete the data up until that point. But just like with deleting columns, we don't want to just select the data like this to delete, because then it's going to we'll give a bunch of empty rows. We want to select the rows. So click on the row number, row 2, and I'm going all the way up to about 2.5 seconds. And I'm going to right click, delete those rows, and scroll up a little bit. And look at this. That's much better now. All that data that was collected before I pushed it is gone. Now, you can see that it also kind of evens out here, right? That's because maybe I kind of caught the cart and forgot to press stop right away. I want to delete that too. So it looks like I wanted to, why don't I just delete from about 3.75 seconds on? Yours is going to be different there, right? So I'm going to go to 3.5 seconds, 3.75 seconds. Select those rows. And I want to delete that data. Delete rows, for me, 27 through 38. And now I got a beautiful straight line there. Your straight line may be sloping upwards, mine's sloping downwards. It's just because I pushed my cart backwards. You may have pushed your cart forwards. That doesn't matter. We're not worried about that. Now that I have a scatter plot, it should be a scatter plot for everybody, not a line graph. If it's a line graph, we want to change it to a scatter plot. And we can do that by clicking on these 3 little dots, edit chart. So if you don't have a scatter chart right here, make sure you click on that so that you do have a scatter chart. Now, I want to draw a trend line. So I'm going to customize. I'm going to go down to series under customize, and I'm going to add a trend line right there. And I want that trend line to be linear. It's okay to leave it as blue, but because I've got blue dots, I'm going to change my trend line to red, just to make it a little bit more visible. It's not very bright there, so I'm going to change the opacity to 100%, which just makes it a little darker there. Those settings I'm not fussy on. As long as we can see the data points and the trend line, you can choose whatever color you want and whatever opacity you want. Again, as long as I can see it. Now, lastly, and then we'll shut it down for the day. Lastly, you're going to go down a little bit further. You're not going to click on this show R squared. People do that. Don't do that. You're going to click on where it says label and it says none. Label, change none to use equation. All of a sudden now, the equation for this graph pops up here. It says negative 0.696 x plus 1.51. 1.51 would be my y-intercept, and negative 0.696 would be my slope. We were looking for the velocity of this cart. The velocity of this cart is, for me, negative 0.696.